Former President Donald Trump in New York City today for the start of his state civil trial.
He and others involved with the Trump Organization are accused of committing widespread fraud to get better terms on loans and insurance policies. The former president and 2024 presidential candidate arrived at the courthouse in Lower Manhattan this morning. This is a bench trial. What that means is that there's no jury and only the judge will decide liability and also how much Trump and other defendants owe in penalties. Trump called the case a, quote, scam and a sham, while the New York Attorney General said, quote, justice will prevail.
This is a continuation of the single greatest witch hunt of all time. We have a rogue judge who rules that properties are worth a tiny fraction, 1/100th, a tiny fraction of what they actually are. We have a racist attorney general who's a horror show, who ran on the basis that she was going to get Trump before she even knew anything about me.
My message is simple. No matter how powerful you are, no matter how much money you think you may have, no one is above the law. And it is my responsibility and my duty and my job to enforce it.
CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa joins us now from outside the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. Bob, good to see you. Thank you for being here. So on one of these counts, a judge already ruled that there was persistent fraud on paper. That's ahead of this hearing today. We heard from Donald Trump, who just played that sound. What are we hearing, if we know at this hour, from inside the courtroom?
Good to be with you. I just stepped out from being inside the courtroom during the opening of this civil trial here in New York. Sat just a few steps behind former President Trump. When he walked into the room, he walked right past the Attorney General, Letitia James, who was seated to his left, did not look at her, did not say anything to her. He walked to his chair and he sat down. The opening arguments played out from both sides. The government made a case that Trump and his associates for years have committed fraud in their view, especially in terms of valuation of the Trump Organization and its related properties. During the course of that opening argument by the government, I watched as Trump had his arms folded across his chest. He leaned toward the table. He seemed to grimace. He definitely shook his head a few times as he listened to the government present in a PowerPoint scenario how they believe Trump committed fraud, and they showed different elements of depositions and images of the properties. Trump's son Eric sat just a few rows in front of me behind his father. And during Trump's opening argument, his lawyer went up there and said that the valuations of these properties are subjective at times, are not perfectly done by any organization, and for the government to claim it was fraudulent, that he had certain valuations, isn't going to pass muster. But as you said, this is a judge-based case. There's no jury in this room. At the end of the day, the judge has every say here in terms of how it proceeds and what's ultimately the ruling.
Judge, no jury. I understand, too, Bob, that former President Trump is appearing voluntarily in court. Is that to help his case, to help his campaign? Why is that?
As you saw on the third floor here at the courthouse, when the former president, the Republican frontrunner, walked in, he stopped and talked to cameras. He talked to reporters. And it's notable that Trump was followed into the courtroom by two of his top political advisors, Jason Miller, who's a key spokesman for the Trump campaign, and Stephen Chung, another spokesman for the Trump campaign. And they were outside here in the New York courthouse area speaking to reporters earlier, and they sat there during the entire proceeding, during the opening arguments section of this civil trial. And that's a projection that this is not just a legal matter for Trump as he deals with the future of his own businesses here in New York. This is a political war for him. He is battling the Attorney General, he is battling the judge, and he's battling to keep his place in the Republican presidential race.
So then, Bob, since you bring up the Republican presidential race, let's linger there for a moment. What impact could this civil trial, amid all the other trials and potential trials that we could see this election season, how might it impact his run for president?
Is that it? Some candidates who are running against Trump, like former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, they've taken on the issue of Trump's finances before on the campaign trail and been hypercritical that Trump has had, in their view, fraudulent business practices and committed fraud, or at least lied about how much he's worth, his net worth. But most Republican candidates who are seeking the nomination are not going at Trump about his legal challenges. They're not taking him on about his federal indictment or about what's happening here on a civil level people in New York. Instead, they're trying to focus on their own messages, in part based on my conversations with them and their top advisors, is they do not want to alienate the Trump voter. They believe that even if these legal burdens ultimately become too much for Trump to become the nominee, they still want to win over that Trump coalition. So you're seeing a very careful Republican field right now, though as they linger in the single digits, it's tough for them to really find a path forward at this point.
All right, Bob Costas, thank you very much. Appreciate it, Bob.